What up, y'all? Let's jump in. So, let's talk about some of this architecture. So, we're talking about if the Millennial Kingdom is our past and not our future, correct? I know there's a lot of Tartarian folks out there, and that is also in the mix and stuff that I still investigate. So, I'm not trying to get tunnel vision here, but when you look at conspiracies and when you look at things today, right, they're just not as though they seem in our everyday conventional narrative. Some things work out and they're in our recent historical narrative that is impossible for some sorts of these occasions to have occurred. Now, what you do have is the spiritual realm that is interacting with this physical realm, and it acts and is intertwined with this world system, this fallen world, right? That is like an operation as if a body. So if the arm moves, the leg is gonna move, and so is the neckline, the waistline, everything, right? The whole body is gonna move in a certain sort of direction, a certain angle, a certain way, right? Either to support it or to have it carry out its action. And so you have to look at when you have this world and the controllers, for instance, they're not just old men. You gotta know that when you get to a certain point, and whether it be a system of government or a system of the world, a person of power and reach. It could even be that you grow a business up to a certain monetary wealth. You're going to have to deal at some point with something from this fallen spiritual world system. It's going to it's going to want to use you to promote the narrative. And you only know what's going on if you're actually in the cult. So none of us that are outside the cult and don't wish that upon nobody, but we don't know exactly how it works. But when you talk about people that are into these, so-called theories that have occurred in our recent past or even in our past before we were here, it's almost like they don't have the ability to tell on themselves, tell on each other, and if they do, it's all part of the narrative to push and promote something else, to weaken the nations, and to make something of evil more the norm. And it's almost like even if it was a part of this prominent person's destruction, it's almost like it's okay because somehow maybe they're coming back, or somehow maybe it would just jump to another individual. I don't know how that stuff works, but it talks in the Bible about this one-mindedness toward the end of times, and that what I gather is that the beast system would be of one-mindedness. And so I think of a body, just like Christ has a body, there's going to be the enemy's going to have a body, in my opinion. And his body is going to be nothing but the epitome of evil, and it's going to be in control of this world system, but still only be able to orchestrate under the rules and laws that God has placed into this foundations of this world system, and not to exceed. And I do believe that once you get to a certain point, whether it be financially or of prominence, that you have to surrender to this fallen system, or you will be obsolete. Even when it comes to sometimes people that are not here anymore in regards to doing good things, are, in my humble opinion, seem to be even of this system and part of the narrative that they're pushing. It's very interesting, and so I just continually investigate that. But you're talking about if there was 800 to 1,000 years added to the calendar, and all the things that I've mentioned, and when you read the word, it talks as if he was coming back within that generation or 40 years. Even when you reread Revelation, it talks about the tribulation time being around that same era, just in the first few chapters of Revelation. But people sometimes will ask me to quote scripture or something, but actually if you reread from the Gospels on, you start to find that it's all throughout. I mean, I can do a video putting scripture on the board, and I will do that. I've just been kind of lazy lately, because I have other channels that I run, and I also have other things, career and stuff. So this is just something I do for fun, and I'm just very interested in it. But I grew up as a regular, normal, what you'd consider a Bible believer. And for me to get to a point to where I believe that these things have already occurred, it took a lot. So don't think that I just decided these things. But it's almost impossible for mankind to have built these structures. And I'm not talking about necessarily, it's the era that they so-called were built in, and the architecture, the ornateness, and the exquisiteness. And then you start to see that there's nobody, that it was obvious nobody was out there trying to tag them up with spray paint. If they did have spray paint, I'm saying nobody was trying to vandalize or nothing, or else these things would have never gotten as glorious as they were. And if there had to be no wars, during a certain era, like literally it was peace for maybe a long time. So we're talking about a different type of humanity, if it was even humanity, right? So let's just go there. And just no technology that's spoken of. So you're talking about in the Dark Ages, all of this stuff has been constructed, and so much of it that it's completely impossible from what we've been taught. I mean, so somebody's going to have to come at me for people that are naysayers. And I understand the Tartarian situation, but I don't think that they just vibrated and used vibrations and, the ether or whatever to do these things. They're too glorious. There's too many of them. And if you looked before the 1800s, how every city in the world almost burned down in the 1800s. So if you went back to there, and then you took this in before the mud flood, and you took it in its real glory state, you're talking about almost something of the heavens, So you have to start looking at a creator, even if you're not into creationism. And so I just wanted to throw that at you, because I'm going to continue this talk, and I'm going to get more into detail instead of just showing you structures, because this narrative runs deep, and it's almost never ending in regards to the biblical narrative. There are maybe some hang-ups or some things that need to be ironed out. I mean, and it's a work in progress. It's not that you want to push a narrative and make it work for yourself because you believe in something. Now, you got to understand that people that were post-millennial kingdoms, somebody's going to have to live in it, and it's going to look something like this, and people are going to be deceived because they would kind of have to, or else they would know if Christ came already, it would be easy for them to believe. It wouldn't take much faith, so the enemy is very deceptive, and he changes time and times, right? It says in the word, and the very elect would even be deceived toward the end of times. The church, it talks about, would be in a glory state, even though it's being, burdened down, right? And you don't really see that today, but you did then. You did. And when it comes to technology, I do believe if the tribulation occurred, the tribulation heat would have burnt it all up in the fervent heat. There would be no real evidence of that. That there was that timeline technology. It would have been fried. I mean, to a pulp, y'all. And then this stuff was put down all over the place. And I do, question the thing about the statues and stuff. And I know some's been refaced and defaced, but we'll talk about that later.